everyone, welcome back to your third tutorial of Build a Game in Unity for Beginners. So as we left things off, as I remember, we got both the players working here. So that's going alright, and they are within their lanes, and everything seems to be going so far so good. So now what we want to do is we want to start thinking about creating some obstacles. And we're going to create and spawn these obstacles over the course of this video and next video. So this video is going to be a little bit more dry because you won't necessarily get to see the obstacles coming down in this one, but hopefully we'll be building towards that for the next video. Alright, so I guess here we go. So one of the ways I'm going to do this is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to press on create and create empty. So I'm going to create an empty game object, okay? And I can do that. And I'm going to call this my game manager, okay? So here I have got my game manager. Now this game manager object is going to be taking care of things like my obstacles, how and when they're going to be spawning, what my score is, and basically it's going to be managing the whole game. And the way it's going to be doing that is obviously through a script. So I'm going to go here in my scripts folder, I'm going to create a brand new script, and I'm going to call it game manager. Okay, and before I forget, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and attach this script onto my game manager. Okay, let me just see what's going on here. Just a second. Okay, so we've got our game manager script opened, and let's just go here, add component, and game manager. Okay, so now we've got our game manager, which has this game manager script, and at the moment it's just boilerplate code, right? Okay, so let's just switch over to Visual Studios, and here we've got our game manager script. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit confusing, but try and bear with me. This game manager is going to be something what we call a singleton, okay? And if you are still confused by the end of this video, in fact, I'll also link in in the description, I'll also link in one of Unity's own tutorials regarding this, and feel free to look it up in more detail. But basically, this game manager is going to be running at the start of our game, and there's only going to be one instance of this game manager, and we will be able to use, we're going to make this game manager static. So what's going to be happening is that we will be able to access the functions and functionality within this class from other classes also. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at how we can do this and how we can make this class a singleton. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to declare a private static variable of type game manager. Okay, so this is the name of our class, and we're declaring a variable of type game manager, and we'll call it instance as per convention. Okay, now what we want to do is, for those of you who have some sort of C++, Java background, something like that, we're going to basically make a getter for this variable, right? So it's a private static variable. If you want to access this variable from outside of our class, then we need some sort of a getter for it, right? So the way we do this in C# is a little bit different, and I'm going to go ahead and type this out. So it's going to be a public static game manager, because this function is going to be returning, in fact, this instance which is of type game manager, and we'll call it instance with a capital I. Again, this is all convention, okay? And the way we do this further is we have something like get, okay? And inside get, we're going to check that if the instance exists, right, or not. So if instance is equal null, then we will find or create that instance. All right, so in this case we'll say instance equals game object dot find object of type game manager. Oops, game manager. Okay, so, and lastly, once we've got it, we will return this instance. Okay, so let's look at what we did, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but this is a format that you will see over and over again, mostly in all of these static classes. So initially what we did was we created a static game manager variable called instance. And after that, I want you to think of this as simply a getter function, which is going to uh, allow us to basically access this instance from different classes. So basically, now that we have this thing set up, we can go in a different class and we might be able to do something like game manager dot instance dot blah 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 blah. Okay, so this will allow us to do something like that. All right, so we've got our initial setup ready to go. Okay. Um, all right. Okay. So what are we going to do next? Okay, so one of the things we want to do next is I need some more assets, right? So initially I just uploaded my car and my background. So I need some more assets. So I'm going to go here, assets, import new asset. I'm going to find my, let's see, desktop quickly. And once again, I'll find a way to provide you guys these assets. I'm not really sure exactly how, but I'll go ahead and do that. So we've got a simple coin. Just made that scrappily up really quickly in Photoshop. And I'm going to have an obstacle. And I called it, notice, obstacle. Anyways, ignore that. Okay, so we've got our little game objects. Now the first thing that we do whenever we get our game objects, like always, is we put them in our scene view, we kind of change the scale, we see it's okay, and then we try and make them prefabs as quickly as possible. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing in this case. I'm going to quickly drag and drop this coin here in front of this car. And I'm going to drag this obstacle in front of this car. And if I run it now, just to get an idea, it's quite obvious that both of these are quite small. So we need to play around with their scales a little bit, alright? So I'm going to go on my obstacle, and let's see. If I change the scale to 2 and 2, this looks much better, I guess, right? And for the coin, if I make it 2 and 2, well, that looks a little too big for my liking, so I'm going to make it 1.5 and 1.5, and that looks a little bit better now. Let's see. Let me try and move it here next to... Yeah, let's see. Yeah, so that's something that I can live with. Of course, we can go back and always change this. So now that I've got my scale fixed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this into my prefabs folder. And I'm going to do the same thing with my coin. I'm going to drag and drop it in my prefabs folder. And now I can go ahead and I can delete both of these from the hierarchy. Okay. So now I'm going to go back in my prefabs folder, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change these names into something more descriptive and pretty. So I'm going to call this one pickup, okay, and interesting, didn't change. And I want to call this one obstacle, okay, that also didn't change. Interesting. Okay, well, anyways, it's really frustrating. Okay, I got it to work, maybe. Pickups, okay, alright, got that going. And, that's weird. I'm not so sure what's going on here. Okay, finally. So, I'm not really sure why I wasn't able to change it from here. But anyways, it seems to be working now. So I've got them renamed here. And we can continue to work on our game manager script. Okay, so this game manager script is basically going to help us create our game objects. So in order to create a game objects, we're going to use something called a stack. Now, let me show you what I mean when I say a stack. Okay, stack images. Okay, so you notice this picture. I just Googled it. This is a stack is a data structure which we're going to be using for our obstacles and our pickups. Okay, so a stack is, as this picture shows, just a simple stack of things, and we can put things on top of the stack, and we can take things off the top of the stack, and we can peek at things which are on the top of the stack. Okay, so this is all you need to know. If you've never dealt with a stack before, I want you to imagine this picture, and we are going to create a stack of obstacles, and we're going to create a stack of pickups, and one by one we're going to put all the obstacles inside our stack, and we're going to put all the pickups inside the pickup stack, and then every time we need to spawn a new obstacle, we're just going to pop one out and use that one. And once we have used that game object, when we no longer need it, for example, when the obstacle has gone below the screen and we don't see it anymore, then we can simply push that same object back into our stack. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is, now it's very interesting for you to note that the reason why we're using the stack game object is simply for the sake of optimization. What I mean to say is we can keep creating game objects and never destroy them, but that would obviously be very bad. It would be very bad because what would happen is if you're playing this on your mobile, for example, then you have limited resources and you cannot just keep on creating game objects. So that's a big no-no. The second thing you could do is you could keep creating the game objects, and at the same time, when you do not no longer need them, you can keep on destroying them. But destroying game objects is also a big no-no, especially in Unity, because destroying is really resource intensive, and that's not something you want to do at runtime, especially when you're using something on a mobile app or something like that. But that's how it is. So what we need to do is we need to be reusing our obstacles and our pickups. So what we're planning to do is we're going to create a pool of them, and we will be basically recycling them for efficiency. All right. So that's a good practice that you want to note down. So over here, what we're going to do is we're going to first of all define our stacks, right? So private stack of game objects, okay? And we're going to call this stack pickup stack. Descriptive name, pickups stack equals new stack of game objects, and boom. Okay, so this is how you define a stack, okay? So private stack, and whatever goes inside these I don't know what to call it, these pointy brackets defines what the type of the things that are going to be in the stack is. In this case, they are all game objects. We called it pickup stack because in this stack we will be storing our pickups, and then we instantiated a new stack. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing, private stack of game objects, and we will call it obstacles stack. Now, please don't mind my spelling if I screw up. I'm not very good at spelling. Okay, so we've got our two private stacks. What else do we need in order to create our obstacles? Well, what we need is we need to be able to provide this script access to the prefabs that we just made, right? What am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say is this script, this game manager script, is basically going to be creating our game objects. Okay. Later on, it will also be determining where to spawn them. Okay. So we need to give this script all the ingredients that it needs to create our game objects, our pickups, and our obstacles. And in order for it to be able to make these objects, it needs to know what they look like, and the information for what they look like is stored within these prefabs, right? So we need to give it access to this so that at the time when this script is instantiating these objects and putting them in these stacks, which we will later push and pop from, right? We need to be able to give it this information so that it can create the right stuff, okay? So the way we can do that is we can make a public variable, right? We can make a public game object array, okay? Let me just ignore the messages. Public game object, and we will call this pick up and big name coming obstacles prefab. Okay, so what I did here is I made a public variable, which is going to be an array of game objects, and I called it pickup and obstacle prefabs, right? What's happening here is when I control save, interesting. Okay, so when I save and when I go back to my inspector here, when I go over to my game manager object, as you can see over here, it asks me that it shows me that pickup an obstacle is prefab, which we just made public, and it's asking me what the size of it should be. So at the moment the size will be 2. The reason why it will be 2 is because we have 2 types of different prefabs which we want. So I'm going to go ahead and drag over these pickup an obstacle prefabs. So now what we did by doing this, by making this public variable, we exposed this inspector field, and inside this inspector field we input our obstacle and pick up prefabs. So now when this script will be creating these obstacles and prefabs, it will, so to speak, know what they look like. Okay, so that's why we did that. All right. Okay, so one more thing before we go forward with the creation. What we want to be able to do is we want to have some sort of getters and setters for these stacks. Now, once again, if you have some sort of C++ or Java type background, you would make, void get pickup stack return pickup stack type situation. In C#, it's a little bit different, but if you're using Visual Studios, it's going to help you out. If you're not using Visual Studios, then you can just type this in. So you right click the stack, quick actions and refactoring, and encapsulate field. So it gives you this, oops, my mouse. So it gives you this, all right? So this looks a little bit different, but essentially it's the same thing. It's a getter and a setter, all encapsulated in one thing, all right? So we can go ahead and do this for the other one. And now we have both getters and setters, all right? What's interesting about this particular format, if you're wondering, is that in this case, what's going to happen is that when we write it like this, it allows only the parent class, that is this game manager class, to use the set option here, okay? So only the parent class can actually access and edit this pickup stack, okay? But it is other classes, because this game manager class is a static class, other classes can get this pickup stack. So basically what's happening is, what I'm trying to say is that this is write only for the parent class, but everyone else can read what's inside the stack, all right? If that makes sense. Okay, so we've got our getters and setters in place. Okay, now we want to start looking at creating finally our stacks. Okay, so let's make a function public void create pickups and obstacles, big name. Okay, so we've got our function create pickups and obstacles, and let's pass in a parameter of int amount. Okay, so whenever we call this function, we will also pass in the amount of pickups and obstacles that we want to create. So for example, when it's working, if I pass in 5, then it will create 5 obstacles and put them inside the stack. And then it will create 5 different pickups and it will put it inside the different pickup stack. Okay, now that we've got this create pickups and obstacles, we can go ahead and copy this one, and we can call it in our start initialization. All right, so for example, if you wanted to do something like this, this is how it works. Of course, if I run it now, nothing happens because we never put anything inside here, but this is what we're going to do now. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to be step one. Okay, so step one, instantiate the game object. Okay, and step two, what we want to do is we want to put the game object inside the stack. Okay, inside the respective stack. Okay, so the obstacles should only go in the obstacle stack, and the pickups should only go in the pickups stack. Okay. Lastly, what we want to do is when we are creating and instantiating these game objects, initially right now we're just creating them. Remember when I said that we're going to be creating a pool and we will be reusing them? So at the start, we're going to be creating 10 of each, let's say. Okay, but we don't want to display all 10 obstacles at once. So lastly, one more thing we want to do is we want to basically set all of them inactive, okay, initially. This is what this function is going to do. Okay, so let's go on and see how we can do that. Okay, so instantiate the game objects. The way you're going to do that is, well, first of all, we're going to have to create amount times of these game objects, which means that we can easily use a for loop. So I'm going to go ahead and use a for loop for int I equals 0, oops, I less than amount, I plus plus. Okay, so this for loop is going to run amount many times, right? Now we need to start thinking about how we can do this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back in here. Okay, so now we need to instantiate the game object. Now, the way you instantiate a game object is something like this. Instantiate, you use the keyword instantiate, okay? And all you need to tell it is you need to give it the prefab that it needs to instantiate, okay? I'm sure if you hover over this, it will tell you. But regardless, what you need to give this is you need to give it the prefab that you need the game object to look like, okay? So we already have the information for the prefabs stored over here, okay? So this is our array that we're getting from the inspector, okay? So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go ahead and just, let's say, use the 0th element. Okay, so when I write simply this, what it's doing is it's instantiating the game object, which has the prefab at the 0th position in this array. Now, when I go back to my inspector, you notice that the 0th element is a pickup, so that means this is instantiating a pickup, all right? Now, all this does is instantiates the pickup, but we want to, once we have instantiated this pickup, we want to push it inside our pickup stack, okay? So the way we do that is something like this. We use our basically setter pickup stack, okay, dot push, okay, and we push this entire item, so we can just encapsulate that in a field here like so, and here we go. So when we look at this line one more time, what are we doing? We get our pickup stack, which is initially empty, okay, so it's a stack just like the stack that we saw here, okay, so it's empty though, and inside it we push the game object. We push the game object, which we just now instantiated, all right? And we instantiated using the prefabs, which we supplied it, because we know what the game object should look like, but now we're telling the script which exact prefab do I really want to instantiate and create, okay? So in this case, we created a game object, and then we pushed that game object into our pickup stack, okay? And now we have this item. What's going to happen is, as this for loop continues, if amount was 5, it's going to run 5 times, and it's going to push 5 times, one by one, these pickup objects, okay? And at the end of it, we will have a stack of 5 pickups. So I want you to imagine, instead of these blue plates, there will be a yellow coin, 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 something like that. Okay, so we instantiated the game object. We also want to do the same thing for the obstacles, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this line. I'm going to paste it here, except instead of the pickup stack, we want to push in the obstacle stack. Okay, so we've got the obstacle stack here, and instead of the coin prefab, we now want to use the obstacle prefab. So over here in my elements, so element.0 was pickup and element.1 is my obstacle. So I want to instantiate my obstacle and then push it in the obstacle stack. Okay, so it seems like so far it's okay. All right, so just give me a second. One thing I'm going to do here is that, just to avoid writing this over and over again, I just want to shorten this name a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and rename, okay, and I'm going to call it simply pickups, okay, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to rename and I'm going to call it obstacles. Okay, so if you feel like, and notice how it's already changed here, if you feel like pickups stack is much more descriptive, please feel free to use it. I'm only changing it here because I did a little mock test before and I was looking at my other code, and in that case I was using obstacles here, so I wanted it to be coherent so I don't confuse myself as I go forward. But if you want, you should name it pickup stack. It's far more descriptive. Anyways, so moving forward, now that we have created these, okay, so step 1 and step 2, we're taking care of it at the same time. One bullet, both of them done, right? We instantiate the game objects, so we instantiate the game objects here, and then we put them in the respective stack by using this bigger push command, okay? So now what we want to do is we want to do this third thing, which is inactivate them, okay? So the way we can do that is every for loop, we create and push the first one, the pickup, we create and push the obstacle, and now we need to basically set them to false, set active to false. The way we can do that is, remember when I showed you this picture, I said you can push onto a stack and you can pop out of a stack, and there's one more thing that you can do, you can peek, okay? So what I can do is I can do something like pickups.peek, okay? And what this does is it peeks at the first element in the stack, okay? And what I can do is, since I just pushed this newly instantiated object, I know that this object is at the very top. So when I do pickups.peek, I know it's giving me this object that I just created. So I can just do set active false, okay? So what I did was I just set it false. I'm going to go ahead and copy this one more time. I'm going to change this to obstacles, and there you go. So we push the objects into our pickup stack, we push the objects into our obstacle stack, and then we peeked at the top of our pickup stack and we deactivated it. So we set active to false, and we looked at our obstacle stack and we set active to false. So it seems like we've done everything, and let me just see if there's anything that we need to do. It seems like everything is in place. And yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and save it, hopefully, and try and see. Switch over here. Let me just see what's going on with the console really quickly. Okay, let me just clear it. In our game manager, we've got our game manager script attached. Don't forget to put the prefabs in or you will have an error. And let's just try to run it and see what happens. Okay. All right. So obviously nothing showed up in the screen, but our game is still working, so that's good. But if you notice here in the hierarchy, as soon as I press play, all of these things, these game objects, showed up in the hierarchy. All right. Now look, when I click on them, you will notice that they are there. They show up, but obviously they are inactivated, so you cannot see them. And this is exactly what we wanted to do. what we've managed to do in this video is we have created our pool. In the next video, what we will be doing is we will be spawning the items from this pool, and then once we have used that item, we will think about how we can recycle that item. Now, one thing that I want to change really quickly over here is that you notice how in the hierarchy, you notice it says pick up clone, obstacle clone, pick up clone. Now that looks a little bit ugly, and it's going to cause us a little bit of problem later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this here to something a little bit more suitable. And the way I'm going to do that is very simple. Over here, where I was peeking at them before setting them active, what I'm going to do is I'm going to peek at them one more time before that. So I'm going to do pickups.peek. Okay, so now I'm peeking at it, and dot name, I can access the name, and I'm just simply going to change the name as I want. So I'm going to call this one pickup. Okay, so the very top one is going to be called pickup, and we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for the obstacles. Okay, so obstacles dot peek dot name, and we will call it obstacle. Okay, so now if I control S save, I go back, and as soon as, let me just clear my console, as soon as I hit play now, you'll notice all these game objects, and we've got the pickup obstacle name fixed. So yeah, again, I realize it's been a long tutorial, but we've covered a lot of good ground in this one. And yeah, I guess this is it for now. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment. And yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next tutorial.